Good morning. Good morning. My name is Robin Smith, and I'm with the Glenn County Office of Education Foster Youth Services. I've been a foster youth services coordinator for the past 15 years, so I've seen many changes, and I just want to say that LCFF has made the biggest impact on the collaboration with our districts. As soon as they knew that foster youth were a subgroup, at one time, I felt like I was on an island alone, and then everybody wanted to know who I was and how do we find these kids and how do we provide services. So I was initially involved in the LCAP process from the get-go. I'm also the homeless education coordinator. So when districts were writing their LCAP, we were there at the table with them, making sure that foster youth voice was there. So in our county, what the foster youth were saying, and CYC, was that foster youth needed a one-on-one mentor at every school site, and we've made that happen in Glenn County. So I hope you'll consider aligning. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Manpreet Singh. I am a youth ambassador with the organization Foster Club and also a student at Diablo Valley College. At age 15, my siblings and I were placed into the foster care system. We remained in care for about 2 years. And were placed back home. Our cases remained open, but we virtually lost all educational support overnight, arguably when we needed it the most, because we were no longer defined as foster youth. Although my parents attended all their state-mandated classes, they were still ill-equipped to support us through the rough transition back home. Luckily, I am in college. I'm finishing up working with various nonprofits now, but I can't say that for too many other foster youth or even my own siblings. Many of them end up in jail or drop out of high school. I believe foster youth services are vital in every aspect of the word for the success of our far too underachieving foster youth population. Our needs are very specific to our population, and all foster youth, regardless of what type of placement, group home, foster home, kin care, need and deserve additional education support services. 50% of foster youth graduating is no coincidence, and that in itself should more than justify the alignment of the definition.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is George White with the National Foster Youth Institute. And I'm from Los Angeles, and I want to tell you the story of 3 children who are in Los Angeles, who 2 of them live with their relatives, and 1 ended up going into foster care. The one that ended up going into foster care in a licensed foster care home was able to get services through the Foster Youth Services Program and eventually go on to graduate college. He is part of the 3% of former foster youth who graduate college. The other 2 were not so lucky because they were with a relative caregiver, along with 40,000 other young people in care who aren't able to reach services. And as dependents of the state, it is the state's responsibility and all said departments under the jurisdiction of the state to provide services for these foster youth. And I appreciate you including this on the agenda today. Furthermore, I think it would be an extreme disservice to these young people, as well as a form of neglect. Thank you.
Good morning, members. My name is Daisy Gonzalez, and I'm a former foster youth who emancipated at the age of 17. I'm also a former budget consultant for the California State Assembly Budget Committee, where I worked building the California state budget during the worst budget crisis that this state has ever seen. Today, I am a doctoral student at the University of California, Santa Barbara, where I will receive a PhD in 2016. FYS works. I'm here in support of aligning the definition with LCFF because I credit 3 things to explain where I am today. First, some amazing teachers. Second, the extreme fear of not knowing where I will live after I age out. And third, an FYS program that paired me up with a mentor. There's a difference between flexibility and responsibility. Foster youth are the state's children, and this is how you can monitor foster youth outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Good morning. Danielle Molay with the California Alliance of Child and Family Services here representing 115 foster care and children's mental health providers in support of the alignment and ensuring equal access to foster care services for all foster youth.
Thank you.
Good morning, Laura Fair with Public Counsel Law Center. We represent hundreds of foster youth and youth who are system involved, including probation youth. Our comments are in line with those you've already heard. Really, we want to make certain there's the county level support and coordination that's essential to our foster youth as they move across districts, as they move across schools. We see too many of them fall through the cracks. We also want to state our support for transparency and really ensuring that we know what the expenditures are and where they're going, and that the state has a good sense to ensure that those supplemental and concentration funds are getting to our foster youth. And finally, just want to note that as we're talking about our foster youth, at least 30 to 50% of them, based on different estimates, are ending up in our juvenile justice system. So we have to make certain that all of our system-involved youth are included and really thinking about a technical fix to make certain that all of those youth are in local control funding formula.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Aliyah Holmes. I am the Foster Youth Services Ed Liaison and Coordinator for Sacramento City Unified School District. I've been working with foster youth now for almost 13 years, 4 years as the Ed Liaison, and so I am here in support of aligning the definition between FYS and LCFF. I don't know if you realize how hard it is when you have a child who's in a relative placement whose caregiver calls to ask for support, and we're unable to do that because they don't meet the actual criteria of what our funding comes from. So I really do hope that you do reconsider and look at aligning the definitions and do provide some additional funding so that we can actually support those children. They're no different than our dependent children. They need the same exact amount of support that we're offering for our dependent juvenile wards, and they deserve it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning, Cecilia Tran with the John Burton Foundation. We are in strong support of aligning the FYS definition of foster youth with the LCFF definition. We operate the California College Pathways program, which seeks to expand access and opportunity to higher education for foster youth. And report after report, we see that foster youth want and expect to go to college, yet the K-12 system often fails them in preparing them to either get to college and to stay in college. And those who enter college often get stuck in a remedial coursework loop, and at the end of the day, only 8% of foster youth are able to obtain a 2-year degree or higher, compared with 47% of their peers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Brendan Tartaglia with Disability Rights California. Foster youth are disproportionately children with disabilities, and we think that all foster youth should be able to benefit from the services to help them get educated. We support the alignment of the two definitions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Sarah Lillis with Ed Voice. We just wanted to reiterate the support for increased fiscal transparency. We think it's critically important not only for local stakeholders to know what resources are being directed towards the underserved community that we're trying to serve, but also you as state policymakers and the state as a whole. To that end, we were really encouraged to hear the department say that they can gather the information from the baseline year from LEAs about what was supplemental and concentration. We would then encourage and recommend that the state calculate that amount for each intervening year until the target, so that next year, when you're here around the table and you say how many of our resources are being directed to the underserved community, that question can be answered.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, committee. My name is Jonathan Tran with the Southeast Asia Resource Action Center. CRAC serves as the primary advocacy organization for Southeast Asian American refugees throughout the country and here in California, where the largest population of Southeast Asian Americans live. In particular, related to LCFF, we've been tracking implementation in several school districts, Long Beach, Fresno Unified, here in Sac City. And these are our two recommendations. First, we'd like to echo comments made in regards to the LCAP transparency. most LCAPs have very lofty language about improving academic achievement for English learners. However, because of the lack of transparency, we're unable to track the specific expenditures as it relates to how those programs will actually serve English learners down the line. The second piece is that there's a lack of authentic parent engagement. I think overall the spirit of the legislature was wise in making sure that parents must be an active part of the process, but unfortunately in application that has not been the case. For example, here in Sacramento City Unified, state regulations requires the creation of 2 parent and community advisory committees, one for the district-wide and one for ELL specifically. But here in Sac City Unified, they just use an existing committee to satisfy that requirement. None such committee exists in Fresno Unified or Long Beach Unified, so we need to do more for parent engagement.
Thank you.
Good morning, members of the committee and staff. Martha Alvarez, San Diego Unified School District. We would like to align ourselves with some of the speakers beforehand about the outcomes, focusing on the outcomes instead of the money and where the money is being spent. We think that LCFF it has a long way to go before we can start seeing progress and results. The focus should be on student outcomes, closing the achievement gap and helping students succeed. For that reason, we think that there needs to be some additional consideration as to any changes that might happen to the LCAP. Regarding to the $4 billion that the governor is proposing, we support that. If there's any additional money in the May revision, we request the legislature to propose putting that additional money into LCFF and not for any categorical programs or expansion of existing programs. We're far away from being adequately funded. The state's placing a lot of expectations on school districts, and we need more money to implement LCFF programs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moira Top here on behalf of the California Charter Schools Association, and I'll be short and sweet. We strongly support the governor's budget for LCFF. We echo the concerns about making sure that any new dollars coming in do go to expanding LCFF, and we appreciate your support of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Frost, representing the Orange County Superintendent of Schools. I wanted to thank you for the local superintendents panel. I think it was enlightening for everyone to show the kind of activity that's going on locally, and particularly the role of the county office in assisting school districts and ensuring both outreach and quality LCAPs. We want to thank the Department of Finance and the governor for the funding that they've put in the budget to ensure that that can continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and staff. Pamela Gibbs, representing the Los Angeles County Superintendent of Schools. Like the previous speaker, I'm thankful for your local panel today, and I'm very pleased with the report provided by the Kern County Superintendent regarding LCAP workload. At LA County, of course, as you know, we have 80 school districts, and we help the school districts with their LCAPs. We appreciate the governor's budget and providing support not only for LCFF, but also for the LCAP funding adjustment for our workload, and we ask for your support on that. And we look forward to speaking with you later this afternoon about the facilities issues as well. Thank you.
Good morning, Steve Ward, California School Funding Coalition. I would also like to echo and support my colleagues from Irvine and San Diego in the search for adequacy. At the same time, I'd also ask that the legislature takes a look at the impact that new costs are having upon base funding. Our coalition is studying that, and both concentration and non-concentration districts are finding that at least 50% of their new base funds will be eroded by new costs, and truly school districts will not be restored to their 2007 and 8 funding levels. So we ask for your consideration to analyze those. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we will now proceed to issue number 3 related to school facilities, and bring back up Department of Finance, LAO, and Department of Education. Okay, Department of Finance.
Good morning, Maritza Urquiza, Department of Finance. As presented in the informational hearing on school facilities, the administration has noted the significant shortcomings and concerns with the current school facilities program, including its complexity, its reliance on state debt issuance, and a first-come, first-served structure that disadvantages small school districts. In order to address these concerns, the governor's budget presents guiding principles to shape a new program. The governor's budget recommends moving away from state debt issuance and target state funding to low-wealth districts. Given that state funding would be targeted to the districts with the greatest need, the governor's budget also recommends exploring a number of tools and local flexibilities to help school districts fund their facilities at the local level, or help school facilities absorb a greater portion of facility cost. The guiding principles and the recommendations are an attempt to continue a dialogue about addressing the shortcomings of the current system. To further assist charter schools with their facility needs, the governor's budget also includes an increase of $50 million Proposition 98 General Fund for the Charter School Facility Grant Program. The additional funding would support program expansion after lowering the free or reduced price meal requirement to 55%. Finally, the governor's budget proposes $273.4 million in one-time Proposition 98 general funding for the Emergency Repair Program, retiring the state's obligation under the Williams Settlement. We're happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thank you. LAO?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members, staff. You should have a copy of our handout, rethinking how the state funds school facilities, in front of you. Going to provide some brief background, and then focus on some of the issues that we've identified with the existing school facilities program, and then provide some ideas for how we could structure a new facilities program. So starting on page 1, just some brief background. As you know, the school facilities program was created in 1998. Two main components were the new construction and modernization programs. New construction was based on enrollment projections, and modernization eligibility is based on the age of a building. Both programs require a local match, and financial hardship program is available to local agencies that don't have adequate resources. Just bringing you up to date on where we are since 1998, we've provided, the state has provided about $35.4 billion in general obligation bonds. Virtually all of that authority has now been exhausted. Additionally, school districts have authorized approximately $75 billion in local bonds and collected about $9.4 billion in developer fees. Starting on page 2, we discuss some of the shortcomings with the current system that we've identified. First among these, we believe that the current state financing mechanism is flawed. As you know, it relies primarily on a bond mechanism and bonds that are issued periodically. We feel this is inappropriate because we know that facilities are an ongoing expense. They're recurring with districts annually planning and budgeting for the upkeep and repair of buildings every year. We think these periodic bond sales create significant uncertainty for school districts and make planning more difficult. If you look at the chart on page 2, it shows you, it kind of visually illustrates the issue that we're dealing with bond funding, with bond funds that are going out to the field fluctuating from about $2.5 billion in the first year of implementation in 1999 to a high of $5 billion in 2002 and as low as virtually no money in the aftermath of the recession. Secondly, as discussed on page 3 of our handout, the current financing system does allow significant inequities based on school district property wealth. We know that there's significant differences in property wealth across districts. With districts with high property wealth are able to raise significantly more at a given tax rate than districts with lower property wealth. And the current financial hardship program that we have in place, and I referenced earlier, only mitigates this issue to a certain extent. It doesn't touch the majority of districts that still have these funding disparities. The figure on page 3 tries to illustrate this issue by kind of imagining, looking at just at our unified school districts across the state, and imagining if they had issued kind of a maximum bond that's allowed under our Proposition 39 provisions, and the amount of funding they could raise per student at that same tax rate. And that shows, for example, that the lowest 20% of districts could raise about $200 per student, and at the same tax rate, our top 20% of districts could raise an average of $1,600 or more per student. Shows you that there are significant disparities there. Page 4, we identified 3 additional concerns. First, as mentioned by the administration, we have a concern with the first come, first served approach of the current financing system. We believe it doesn't always address the districts with the greatest need. It creates advantages for districts that have dedicated facilities, personnel, staff, and we know that it requires many districts to hire consultants to navigate the complex process of applying for and receiving state funding. Just one fact that helps illustrate that is that districts have to deal with sometimes as many as 10 or more state agencies to obtain funding. Additionally, the state was sued over this approach in the Godinez lawsuit in 2000, lost this suit, and took some measures in the immediate aftermath of that suit to settle those concerns, but continued to use the same first come, first served funding approach for new construction and modernization funds moving forward. We also, as touched upon earlier, have issues with the current system being excessively complex. I mentioned the 10 agencies or more that school districts may have to deal with. This process can limit school districts' flexibility in using state and local funds to meet local needs. And finally, the accountability system that we currently have, we believe, is not optimal. We believe there are several measures in place that allow the state to track expenditures and ensure that school districts are spending those funds on allowable uses, but there's a lack of incentives currently for districts to develop comprehensive plans showing how they're going to use those dollars to meet local needs, similar to the LCAP process on the school operations side. On page 5, we discuss several broad principles that the state could use to shape a future school facility program. First among these, we recommend creating an annual school facilities grant to reflect our belief that school facilities are an ongoing recurring expense that should and can be considered on an annual basis. This grant would be based on the expected facility cost to replace or maintain buildings in their current state. And the state would determine a minimum share of this cost that it would cover for all school districts and award these grant funds annually on the basis of student attendance. Secondly, we would propose adjusting this grant for differences in local resources to address our concern earlier with disparities in local property wealth. We would provide districts with low property wealth a larger state share of funding and provide districts with high property wealth the minimum state share. Thirdly, we recommend adjusting the grant for prior state investments in school facilities. This recognizes that the state currently owes more than $50 billion in principal and projected interest on school bonds dating back to 1988. So we would recommend prioritizing any new state funding to districts that have not already received significant state funds by reducing grants for districts that the state is paying significant debt service for currently. Fourthly, we recommend providing one-time funds to address the existing backlog of school facilities projects. This would use one-time Proposition 98 funds to address projects that are outstanding currently. There are several different methodologies the state could use to allocate these funds. Currently, we know that there's about $1.2 billion in applications to the State Allocation Board based on current school facility program eligibility rules. The state could continue with these with the same eligibility approach under the school facility program. Secondly, it could open up a new competitive grant process to reflect some of the concerns with the way funds are allocated currently and set a new set of state priorities to allocate those funds. Thirdly, to ensure that all school districts have at least some funds to address existing needs and backlogs, the state could simply provide those funds on a per-student basis. And finally, to address our concern earlier with the current existing accountability system, we recommend requiring school districts to create and adopt 5-year school facility accountability plans. Again, this would function similarly to the local control and accountability plans on the school district operations side. And similarly, we would recommend that the state require specific elements to include in those plans, such as how the districts are going to use and leverage state funds, local funds, developer fees to meet its ongoing maintenance needs, to accommodate future enrollment, and to accomplish major modernization projects. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Department of Education.
Monique Ramos on behalf of State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Torlakson. I'll be brief because the superintendent has addressed both this committee and the policy committee. The superintendent feels that the program had a successful program for the last several years. You know, we've built thousands of classrooms and modernized thousands more. But the state still needs to continue its commitment to school facilities, with over 50% of our facilities being over 25 years old and 10% over 75 years old. We still have a role in this. The superintendent is very excited to look at opening the program and looking at programmatic changes, but he does not support funding school facilities with Proposition 98. We just had a hearing a few weeks ago about adequacy and the needs that school districts have long term, along with the conversations had today about what districts are doing surrounding LCFF, the assessment system, as well as the Common Core state standards. And with that, I have Fred Yeager, our Interim Director of School Facilities Division, if anyone has questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions from committee members? That was a joke. So I'll get right to it. To the LAO, your proposal on page 5, that's really not the Department of Finance's overview. That's kind of a hybrid type thing that you're laying out as far as options for the legislature.
Yeah, this is our own proposal based on our own concerns. I mean, the department can certainly speak to some of the differences, but I think maybe chief among them is that we believe that there's still a strong role for the state to play in funding school facilities, and we think that the state should provide funds, at least some funds, to all school districts to help build new or modernize their facilities, whereas I believe the administration's approach would primarily target the really low resource districts.
Okay. Well, I guess that gets to the key question, and you have elements here as far as what a new system would look like in California, you know, based upon how you would allocate resources. But that's the question: is are you talking about using existing Prop 98 dollars or for future bond monies? You don't lay out here where the money would come from to do any of this.
So, and there's certainly more detail available in our recent report that you should have received a copy of that has the same name. But one of the decisions that the legislature would have to resolve in the coming months that we don't make a specific recommendation on is the funding source, of course, as you identify. You could fund this program within Proposition 98. There's some precedent for using Proposition 98 funds to fund some facility needs. emergency repair, deferred maintenance. The legislature could also fund outside Proposition 98, and we would just we would, I guess, hope that the legislature focuses first on issues with the current program, which have been widely identified, and concerns that are shared by the Legislative Analyst's Office, the administration, certainly many districts that we've heard from in the field, the State Allocation Board, and reach some kind of consensus on what the major issues that need to be addressed with the current program are, and then after that look at in a